everyone was like, Bricky is collecting VTubers. Well, now I am collecting the Warhammer content creators. She's collecting neckbeards. What?
Approach tends to lean towards a logical reasoning disconnected from the emotion of sacrificial loyalty. On the other hand, sometimes the only way to win an ongoing vicious campaign of slaughter in the 41st millennium is by digging in and refusing to surrender no matter the cost, and something the Imperium of Man, Eldar, and just about all other races have learned over the millennia. The Tau, while logical, seem to lack the real stomach for the grim realities that they face. Realities like alien horrors who have no concept of retreat, or fanatical superhuman warriors who will gladly exterminate every trace of you by any means and any cost necessary, if required to do so. There are individual exceptions, of course, and the Tau, moreover, have found convenient ways to get around the fact that they prefer not to get their hands dirty when it comes to meat-grinding battlefield slaughters that are all too common in the dark future. Why fight a battle when you can have your minions do it for you? The Tau will often use the Kroot as their melee-based infantry. Now, the Kroot are far more warlike race than the Tau themselves, and they're not only found in the eastern fringe region where the Tau originate, but they are concentrated here. The Kroot are deceptive in that they appear feral and savage, but are actually capable of sniping specific high-value targets from enemy units.
Kind of look like grown-up Murlocs.
Or others such as communication units and
the Kroot are avian Xenos, who are a client race of the Tau. They operate as mercenaries. Yeah, these ones are the guys with balls. These are the ones that will fight ya. Face to face.
So on. They then will emerge from cover to smash the uncoordinated remnants of their targets, and this is where they would diverge from the Tau, as the ensuing close quarter combat is truly savage, instinctive, and animalistic. And the Kroot are more than happy to take a pause mid-battle and bite chunks out of fallen enemy for a bit of fast energy on the go. And whilst these displays are distasteful for Tau warriors, it's tolerated, as the Tau are very aware of the critical role the Kroot play for them, and will turn a blind eye to such matters. The numbers of Kroot and their passion for battle make them an invaluable ally for the Tau, yet they operate far more in mercenary attitude than adhering to the true teachings of the Tau Va. The Tau will, generally speaking, use fairly simplistic and age-old battle tactics.
Did she do Necron and Krieg Boys net yet? No, Necron Day is reserved for Friday. Because I have a community member who is a really big fan of the Necrons, and the day that he's off, he told me that it is Friday. So I'm reserving Necrons for Friday. Oh wait, look at this. Is that a little baby Tau or something? Oh, they kind of look like birds more. Birds/lizards, space chickens. Yeah, space chickens.
Of using their firecast units to soften up an enemy at range before allowing their Kroot supporting fighters to jump in and take the brunt of the dirty fighting. Kroot carnivore squads utilizing Kroot hounds play a powerful, albeit unpleasant role here in their ability to track enemy before engaging in brutal savagery. The Kroot have even trained their hounds to rip at the weak points of known enemy, the joints of Space Marine power armor, for example. And these squads can also be seen to use Krootox, a large creature who can serve as a mobile weapon platform. And it's believed that Kroot eat their prey not simply for sustenance, but they can also begin to over time adopt traits of their target, increased muscle mass, for example, or enhanced sensory abilities. They can also begin to display traits from their victims' culture, so they might exhibit not only physical but social tendencies as well.
So while the orcs get stronger after fighting something, these guys get stronger after eating them. Very cool.
Well, while this may lend similarities to Tyranids, there's no suggestion of any relation to the same process. In fact, it would be likely very dangerous for Kroot to ingest Tyranid flesh, because who knows what invasive DNA they could unwittingly bring into themselves, and furthermore open themselves up to developing tyrannic sympathies or higher receptiveness to follow the commands of the hive mind should it ever enter the system. One would hope that the Kroot would be aware of these inherent dangers.
Hopefully.
Because they're
so are the Kroot smart, or do you think that the Kroot accidentally ate a Tyranid and then evolved into a really weird Tyranid, and the Tyranids know that, and then they started warring with the Kroots and created a whole different type of Tyranid that would be a larger threat? I don't know. Is that a conspiracy theory? The Kroot will refuse to eat the Tyranid flesh. Okay, so they know better. They are smarter. Okay. Fire at will. What does this mean?
Comparatively weak physique, coupled with the fact that the Tau just generally prefer to fight at a distance, they have to that end developed a range of weapons and force multiplying platforms that enable the Tau to play to their personal preferences. This means careful planning and tactical analysis. The Tau preference is rarely one of emotional reaction or aggression, but assessing the best possible outcome. And this is another admirable trait for the Tau, and again a relatively unusual one in the darkened galaxy of the future. To be able to make such objective planning, the Tau will even abandon a base if it comes under attack, dismantle important apparatus, and then return later when they have a higher chance of successfully retaking the position. The Tau also will use two primary tactics known as Killing Blow and Patient Hunter. As the names describe, these are a highly focused directed attack to knock out high-value targets in a strike effort, and the second more of an ambush when an enemy will be lured from a position of strength into a weaker kill zone before being destroyed. Unlike many
You know, I can appreciate this. I like that. I like that Luetin talks about their, like, fighting tactics. That's a neat little piece of lore added into this video.
As the Tau do not combine their ranged and melee combat as commonly as other races, their tactics and battle organization also differ to allow for these roles to be appropriately engaged. And this means they're seen to deploy in formations that are ancient to human history, where the Tau with their rifles will form a front rank of range power to soften up targets, while the Kroot melee will wait behind, ready to leap forward as and when the enemy have closed the gap enough. This will enable the Tau warriors to retreat, take up a new position, ready to engage again at a safe distance. And you can likely imagine what Imperial soldiers might think of such tactics. The Tau possess a variety of infantry-based ranged weapons, but it's worth simply mentioning primarily the base pulse rifle. This is essentially the Tau lasgun, and unfortunately for the Imperium, it beats mankind's offering on both power and range, giving the Tau warrior the ability to fire extensive repeating rounds.
A better flashlight. They're scaredy cats, as I heard. Never played, sadly. Probably would get thrown out of the Games Workshop store for swearing like a sailor, so you win some, you lose some, I guess. Yeah, gotta be a good sport, right?
Pulse rifle uses powerful electromagnets to fire a subatomic particle, which then breaks down, creating a plasma pulse upon leaving the weapon. Now, as the Tau utilize electromagnetic weaponry, they also have access to railguns, which are projectile-based and fire rounds as you would expect at an extremely high velocity, the result being, as you might expect, dealing considerable damage to the target. The Tau also somewhat exclusively lean heavily towards using battle suits for their warriors to fight in. Similarly to a Grey Knight's Dread Knight, Tau battle suits are powerful combat exoskeletons, and unlike most other forces that use some kind of exoskeleton warframes as a highly specialized powerful support unit, the Tau use them far more commonly. For the Tau, they make up an important part of the general Firecast forces. And additionally, the Tau have been continually making significant leaps forward in the advancement of their technology, and the battlesuit is one of their highest achievements so far. Battlesuits are more than just powerful tools, they are devastating force multipliers assigned to only the most skilled Tau warriors, and enable a Tau force to lay down suffocating levels of fire or highly focused specific power to punch through heavy high-value targets. Combining their railgun tech with smart missile systems, the battlesuits smother enemies with withering levels of fire, their missile systems being particularly feared as cover will not protect. The missiles fire and are drone guided, and as such will find a trajectory to their target regardless.
Oh god, it's like in Helldivers, the automatons. It's kind of what it's giving me. It's kind of giving me those vibes. I know Warhammer came before Helldivers, but it's just, I'm getting PTSD right now.
Regardless of cover. Tau battlesuits are formed of a lightweight yet extremely strong nanocrystalline alloy. The suit's angles are formed much like armoured tanks of the 20th century in that their design shapes are hoped to allow solid projectiles to safely deflect off the suit. The alloy is then coated with a liquid metal finish to help reflect varying degrees of laser fire. Despite their specifically different tactics, the Tau are a relatively flexible force, combining both firepower and flexibility, and making use of their advanced weaponry and playing to its strengths in logical fashion. They make use of allies to fill in for their own shortcomings, and make use of simple AI drones to either engage or assist in protecting troops. As with Most
Good-
races,
good
they also
plan,
sport heavy
thanks.
vehicle weaponry that can deal devastating levels of firepower, and the key difference with the Tau is that their forces are far more specialized than other races. While the Imperium, for example, has specialists, usually also capable of taking on multi-roles as necessary. The same to an extent for other races, give or take.
The Crocs. Yeah. Like the shoe. I like them. They're cool. At first I thought they were murlocs. Like they looked like grown-up murlocs or something, but they look more like birds.
Tau, though, as with their society,
Hi,
take
Sammy.
on a specific role, and that is the limit of their role. In some regards, this can be a positive to have highly specialized forces who know their role specifically and know that role well, but the obvious downside is that once you've lost a specific unit in your battle force, it can undermine your capabilities and your tactics. And this, though, is where the battle suits come in, as they're highly mobile and able to fill in any gaps across a battlefield, as well as react quickly to changing situations that could place vulnerable units at risk. Now, the Tau Empire would go through multiple expansions in its history, but we begin at the second expansion of the Tau Empire, which was launched with the New Horizon Accelerator engine, allowing the Tau to achieve longer space travel than ever before. The Tau were also now reinforced with their Kroot allies, and a Tau known as Commander Puretide would, through this expansion, achieve legendary notoriety, crushing an Orc invasion.
All 40Ks were Death and Destruction Orcs Paradise. Yeah, they're in Orc Heaven. That's why they need to be put into the ground. Well, they come from the ground, but they need to die. They need to be vaporized. Put the Necrons and the Salamanders on the Orcs, please.
Where through his calculating tactics and Tau principles of long-range engagement somehow made the prospect of battle unenjoyable even for orcs. Puretide was not simply a warrior and commander either. He had mastered all aspects of combat and military tactics and would bring new ideas for Tau warriors to learn from and take a more balanced and flexible attitude to battle. Puretide would tutor promising prodigies of the Firecast, and many of his aspirants would go on to carve their names and achievements into Tau history themselves. Yet this training would also instill a bitter rivalry between his aspirants who all wanted his attention and approval, yet still they would share a close bond and respect. Now, some of those most notable aspirants were Shasera, Caius, and joining them, Shovar. Now, they had all previously demonstrated strong skill both in battle and strategy, and now they were here to learn directly from the master. Each had individual styles to warfare and relevant philosophical thinking to pair with their approach to military engagements. As their training reached completion, each would leave taking their new names and leave to fight as Tau commanders across war zones throughout the Tau Empire. Commander Puretide, though, would suffer serious wounding during the destructive Damocles War with the Imperium. Unsure as to if they would be able to retain his experiences in memory devices, that is, Tau mind-captured devices used to preserve the former commander's experience so that it would be accessible by later Tau commanders, and this would be known as the Puretide Engram neurochip. The Ethereals wanted to scan his mind to retain its high value to the Empire. Now, these Engram chips would be installed in the minds of Fireblades and Battlesuit commanders, enabling them to function with a common understanding of Puretide's experience and adapt to any tactical situation. The unforeseen downside to this was that those who had been implanted...
Was that like the DLC to their brainwashing already? They got these little chips now? Huh. Okay.
With the chip will enable them to draw from their existing own personal experience, and so consequently would suffer losses as a result of being unable to adapt to situations that they may have actually had their own experiences with. But this situation also further evidences to the Ethereals having the imagination and the willpower to use mind control devices against lower Tau castes. Later they would be ordered to undergo forced surgery to remove these engram chips, with the unfortunate consequence it left the warrior leaders drooling vegetables. The extraction of the engram chips effectively lobotomized them. Now, the Damocles War and many of the events surrounding it deserves far more of an expansive detailing than I can give here today, but for now suffice to say, the Imperium smashed the Tau like a force they could never have imagined. Yet through one thing and another, the Tau still managed to emerge victorious. Yet this initial war with the Imperium left them with a humbling understanding.
Oh, this is a Titan, isn't it? We were talking about this earlier, right? Or am I misunderstanding? They're these like giant, super giant mechs, right? They're for the Imperium, if I am correct. Yeah, Reaver Titan. Nice. You have a whole series on Titans, Powdur. Oh, very smart. Okay, okay. Wait, I think that's on my list. I have The War in Heaven, Crimson Fists, Rylanor, Harlequin, Eldar, Gavin Bob, Janovic, Siege of Rax, Exodite, Imperial Knights, Dreadnought, Deep Dives. Yeah, like Rylanor. And the Anchorite and Bjorn, the Fell-Handed. And then your guys' submissions too. Oh boy. We got a lot to get through.
That they had fought against only a small taste of the true power of the Imperium. The Tau leadership made a decision that Puretide's existing current pupils should be placed into stasis to ensure that they could call upon his powerful teachings and have commanders available when it was critically necessary. One of these pupils was, of course, Chasseur Chassera, Commander Shadowsun. Shovar, now known as Commander Farsight, would continue to lead the Tau forces in a period of reclamation to secure lost territory from the Imperium. Additionally beneficial for the Tau would be that the
Wait, you know. Here you can see Imperial Knights, the small ones, these guys, A Warhound Titan in the back. Oh! Okay. And then a Reaver Titan. Bigger, we have Warlord Titan, Warmaster Titan, and Imperator Titan. Holy smokes. I see, okay. Warhound Titan in the back. Oh, okay. This is probably... My big fat head is blocking it. Maybe it's just a zoomed up photo, but... That's probably one of those... The biggest here. Bigger, we have Warlord. Maybe this is a Warlord Titan. Sorry, my big fat head's in the way.
They could never have
walking
imagined.
Notre Dame.
Yet through one thing and another, the Tau still managed to emerge victorious. Yet this initial war with the Imperium left them with a humbling understanding that they had fought against only a small taste of the true power of the Imperium. The Tau leadership made a decision that Puretide's existing current pupils should be placed into stasis to ensure that they could call upon his powerful teachings and have commanders available when it was critically necessary. One of these pupils was, of course, Chasseur Chassera, Commander Shadowsun. Shovar, now known as Commander Farsight, would continue to lead the Tau forces in a period of reclamation to secure lost territory from the Imperium. Additionally beneficial for the Tau would be that the Imperium found itself yet again distracted, this time by the Tyranid High Fleet Behemoth, which significantly diverted their attentions and resources. Commander Farsight would cross the Damocles Gulf, what would be known as the Farsight Expedition. During this time he spent extensive time studying the Imperium, their tactics, and any recorded fragments of useful information he could pull together to expand his abilities in countering and exploiting the humans, while at the same time learning from some of their approaches to battle and tightening up weak points in his own battle plans. With the Imperial withdrawal though, the Orc menace had already begun to exploit the weakened planets on this side of the Gulf, and so by the time the expedition arrived, infestations of Orcs had already become established and were spreading. Farsight was
We were talking about Farsight earlier today. Thank you for the follows, guys. Look 'em. Emperor has a TTS is also a must-watch. Yeah, that's been recommended to me too. I think that's like a series, right? Like a playlist. Have to be for another day though.
disturbed by this Orc infestation, so much so that he decided it more important to halt and then totally destroy the Orc threat. This would take priority over completing the reconquest of other Tau worlds, which were now soft targets because of the Imperium's other concerns. This decision by Farsight was directly against the instructions of the Ethereals, who had tasked him with securing the Tau worlds here. After costing
Farsight wasn't as brainwashed. Fun fact, the Tau thought the Imperator Titan was propaganda because it's 150 meters height. They didn't believe such big thing could exist nor move until they found a big ruined cathedral with legs and arms. Oh no. What a rude awakening. They really are they just don't know. They're just guys who don't know.
engagements on the world of Atari Vo, Farsight's force would return to the Tau enclaves. Yet on returning found to their horror that while they'd been fighting Orcs with great difficulty themselves, in their absence, yet more Orcs had assaulted the other Tau enclave worlds. The warboys of the Green Menace ran riot across the Tau planets and space, and it would become clear that the war boss Farsight had been hunting at Atari Vo had in fact doubled back to the enclave space, united the Orcs there, and then waged a crushing assault on the enclave planets. Commander Farsight was greatly troubled by his failings here, his lack of vision and understanding that had already proved so costly. After placing himself into a lengthy period of reflective meditation, despite all the going on, Farsight would lead the Tau with inspired actions from world to world, destroying the Orc in all manner of creative solutions. Finally, freeing.
He came back better, guys. That's why we need to give people second chances. Okay.
The Enclave world from the horrors of the Orc assault, and Farsight himself hunting down the Orc chief and by all accounts besting him in single combat. Farsight had won and restored his reputation, but the threat of the Green Menace still remained, and this would not be the last clash between the Tau and Orc. In fact, notably a distant world, Arthur's Moloch, whose surface showed little signs of life or settlement, but having just liberated their own enclaves, the Orcs should not be allowed to establish a footing on this planet so near to Tau worlds. Farsight, they would encounter a stranger sight of what appeared to be an ancient temple on this seemingly dead world. Orcs who were falling in battle would cause strange bursts of light and energy from the ground itself, an event never witnessed before by the Tau. Farsight was transfixed by this curiosity, until this disk of light and energy would pour out red-horned creatures with blades as dark as space itself, screaming unintelligible war cries and slaughtering the Orcs. Other pink entities would tumble out from the light, sending out streams of brightly coloured flame that turned any Tau they touched to stone, water, or screaming scorched bone.
What the fuck are these? Are they Zeeches? Zeeches, dudes? The ones that are red are corn. These are Zeech.
Flesh disintegrated from their bodies. Farsight ordered a retreat, but his gaze was caught by this energy, this portal, this connection to somewhere. His eyes were filled with the void. What was this thing? A tear in reality? A gateway to another dimension? It seemed infinite, yet he could feel the call of billions upon billions of deaths. This interaction would fundamentally alter Farsight from here on. He had borne witness to a danger unimaginable by the Tau, but before having time to consider its implications, he would black out, thankfully being retrieved by his warriors and returned to their flagship. As the Orcs now continued to fight on the surface, seemingly spurred on by the violence spilling across the battlefield, the Tau sought to retreat and disengage, and thankfully for them, the Orcs seemed now far more concerned with battling the red-horned aliens and pink tumbling oddities than they did the Tau, and were throwing themselves ever more aggressively and enthusiastically into the fight as if by some long-trained instinct or rivalry. Yet Farsight would now countermand this retreat. Even the ethereals attached agreed that they must investigate this new danger. Planetside again, they would re-engage these new aliens, who now were joined by flying creatures bearing axes and whips. The tumbling pink oddities and red-horned sword-bearers joined them, and Farsight found himself engaged with one of the
axes and whips. Okay.
The massive
I guess I was
flying creatures.
Slanesh.
Worse still was the majority of the initial Tau force deployed were killed in short order in any manner of unpleasant fashions. And compounding the agony, an ethereal was slaughtered, cut from head to groin, as its flaccid halves of body would tumble apart in a fountain of blood.
Wait, don't they only have 2 ethereals? Oh, I wonder if that broke the brainwashing. This is corn, isn't it? Or a big demon? This guy looks so freaking cool. I can already hear the metal music.
A screaming cry came from the Tau re-establishing battle lines, and Farsight would restore order amid the panic and reform teams to continue holding their own. Despite their best efforts though, another ethereal would be gored to death, and the Fire Warriors were now openly breaking. They'd never fought foes like this that seemed to appear as quickly as they were dispatched. Sometimes it felt like for every one they killed, 2 would appear. But Farsight had noted that these new foes were avoiding some statues around this apparently abandoned temple. He would see via his suit's visual feed from another battle group, one of the statues wore a hexagrammatic medallion, and even Farsight found that to look upon it eased the pain he had felt ever since looking into the void space. Trusting his instincts, he ordered the battle group to retrieve this object and carry it toward these new horrors. The report came back. It was working. The oddities were retreating at the sight of this object. It was an engagement that no Tau had ever seen before, and as a resulting tactic that was entirely unfathomable to them. Farsight would consider teachings from Master Puretide. To secure victory, the wise must adapt, and adapt he would, ordering his warriors to avoid spilling blood, and if they took any hits to immediately retreat and re-engage. His instincts would prove correct as the red alien creatures seemed to howl in despair, weakened without the blood they apparently so craved and were fueled by. These events that the Tau and Orcs had unwittingly triggered through their orgy of bloodshed, as several of these winged giant alien creatures made for Farsight, he would fling the hexagrammatic medallions toward the energy void disk, and before the aliens could come crashing down upon him, a massive blast erupted from the void portal. Every Tau came crashing down into the dust, and as they came to, assisting each other, they looked around to see no sign at all of these aliens from out of the unknown void. The Tau here would prove victorious over the Orcs as well, but all of this was a hollow victory. The Ethereals had all been slaughtered, leaving the Tau without guidance. The Enclaves had lost their spiritual leaders. It was a catastrophic and unprecedented loss. Farsight was even more troubled now than previously though. These creatures, his visions, what were these aliens? Why were they so bizarre in appearance and their abilities and seemingly like the Orcs sadistically violent? Why did these creatures exist at all? Did they not have homeworlds and societies of their own? The more he considered it, the more it disturbed him. Was there more to the galaxy than developing your culture, progressing your territory and societal unity? Something far more sinister it seemed lay beyond their comprehension, but not, perhaps, beyond their imagination. Far from homeworld, and with the Ethereals slain, Farsight could not shake his conclusions that there was some alternate, perhaps parallel reality that ran alongside their own. It would explain many things and all seemed to be fitting into place the more he ordered the events and conclusions from his experiences so far. It seemed to Commander Farsight that the Ethereals must have had some knowledge of this, yet chose to hide it from their people, keeping them in a state of ignorance. He would feel confusion in his own spirit now as well, a sense that the castes here may well be better off without the restricting, controlling Ethereals who ordered everyone as to what they should be doing. It had all
Now they're free. Interesting.
seemed sensible in the past, but now somehow they seemed cold, uncaring, lacking empathy for their fellow Tau. Were the Ethereals controlling the castes? The more Farsight considered it, the more his conclusions about the strange void creatures all seemed to fall into place. It was as if, without the Ethereal's presence, he was able to clearly think for the first time, that his mind was unclouded and unrestricted. He disturbed even himself with such thoughts. He couldn't possibly vocalize these thoughts to others, yet these conclusions seemed of such importance and scale that he couldn't simply put them back in the box. His eyes were open. He could see the danger to the Tau was not only their enemies, but now it was himself as well, and his dark, troubling thoughts. Oshova would retreat into self-imposed exile. The Tau already have a detailed history, even for their short existence. And this is not the end of Oshova, and for the Tau themselves, they've only begun to just learn the ways of the galaxy in the 41st millennium. The Tau are a far more complex society than appears on the surface. There are many ethical and moral issues going on with their ideology, and Farsight was the first to see the truth of this. The Ethereals will not relinquish their positions of power easily, and the other pupils of Commander Puretide lie in stasis. The future for the Tau as they begin to see can be no peaceful or simple affair. They will learn the hard way, as humanity has had to for so long, that the darkness and horrors of the galaxy are unrelenting.
We're gonna find out. We are blood-born to the Redo. We are blood born to the first and born by blood to the second, named for what we have done and might yet do, and like ourselves, our true names are not carved in stone. The Talva. Yes. Very nice. Yay! We did it! We finished our first Luetin video! Yay! I am so proud of us. Happy about that video though. Wow, that was like a super deep dive. Lots of really interesting info though. I liked it. The Tau, kind of sad that they're so ignorant. They're Xenos and they're a threat, so they must die. We love the lore masters. I'm a huge fan of them. Whenever I was into World of Warcraft lore, I was always so thankful for the lore masters. It's just, I wouldn't even know where to start with all of this. Being introduced into a new universe. So thank God for these content creators who put it all together. And they add nice photos and stuff too.